Here we go. People are coming in. Cool. Nice to see. Ooh, I'm seeing a few people who I've already seen once, at least once today, if not twice. Yep, at least two people that I've seen twice today. So nice to see that people keep coming back. It means it must mean we're doing something well. As you are signing on, so some of you already know the ritual, but there's a few different questions in this one than our earlier one. So if you're getting bored, those two or three people who've been with us, who've already spent like 3 hours with me today, if you're getting bored of the questions, we're mixing it up here a bit, but as people are signing on, we'll keep sharing this in the chat. There's a link. You can also go to menti.com and enter the code. You can also use your phone and scan this nice little QR code. And this is just, we have a few questions to understand a bit who is here, what you're expecting to get out of this space, why you're coming, what questions you're asking, or what you're curious about, what needs you have. So as we have lots of people signing in, I'll give you a few minutes to get through some of the questions, and then we'll share some of the answers. Enjoy the music, enjoy the mood. We're here to not only learn but also to connect and to have fun with each other. So I'll just repeat this a few more times as we get people slowly trickling in here. We have the Mentimeter, which is an opening, I still don't know what to call it. It's not a survey, it's not a poll, it's an opening thing, something that helps us understand who's here, what you're looking for. Some of the questions we're asking is, where are you calling from? I don't know why I can't read that right. So we have a lot of people from the US today, which is interesting to see the difference between our other sessions that we've been having. Okay, and so you can keep if you're just signing in, we're just asking you to. Thanks, Adrian, for sharing in the chat. There's a link to this Mentimeter, and we're just allowing us to all get a sense of who's here and what you're looking for. So we're asking a bit of what your role is related to this topic. We work in philanthropy, so we have 7 people here who work in philanthropy. People can multi-select, so you might be more something else. If you're something else, if you could write in the chat, what is your something else? We're really curious to understand that. And some people support networks, some people coordinate networks. Why are you coming here? So we have convinced boards. That's how networks can achieve systemic change. That's really important. More tools and ideas to help make the case. Learning from others' experiences, connecting. We will definitely leave some time for connecting. Moving into the field of shaping networks. Okay, so that's nice to see some new people in this space. In the process of writing and making the case. Cool. So we want to see if we can get a chance to workshop that with us, whoever that is. Understand philanthropic perspectives, developing our emerging networks governance model. Ooh, there's so much richness in here. We'll also be sharing these if we can get our act together afterwards. I work with a national network of volunteers. Keep getting asked the same questions over and over. Oh yeah, I empathize with that. And let's see what else we have here. What's one thing you'd like to take away? Ideas for shaping networks, list of funders. We have something like that. We can see that later. How others are defining and measuring your impact. How these about making a case, how to sustain, grow, and impact network. I'm going to come back to these, or I'm going to allow you to check these a bit later. But their last question is, we ask this in every space, would you rather dance or sing? So, 4 people are saying sing. I'm really regretting not tracking, because I don't ask you for your email here. I'm not tracking who wants to sing because I want to pick on the singers. But I'm not leading this session, so I don't know if I'll have the liberty to do so, but we'll definitely have a bit of time for dancing. And I'll unshare the screen. And before I hand it over to our hosts for today, a few of you have already seen this video once or twice, but I'm going to invite you to watch a very quick video about the Networks Festival. And what I'd like you to do while you're watching it is, it's just 2 minutes, but it gives us an introduction of why we're hosting this whole festival, not just this session, but why we want to bring people together around this topic. And what I invite all of you to do is just to take a moment as you're observing it to note what really resonates with you. What are you hearing in the video that you yeah, just when you hear it, that's something that you feel like, that's something that I resonate with. I don't think I need to say anything else. Let me just share it.
If you want to change the world, throw a better party.
Addressing complex issues requires radically changing the way we work together.
We believe networks are the incredible invisible forces with the potential to reshape our world.
Thousands exist around the globe.
They drive deep change across education, jobs, equity,
climate, agriculture, biodiversity,
migration, health, and so on.
There are so many groups, so many communities of practice, so many local ecosystems, so many alumni associations.
Networks are very powerful in creating a sense of belonging and also connection.
The cross-pollination of energy, of positivity and encouragement.
People can understand each other's interests, find their intersections, and work together on what matters to all of them.
But so many times, networks are underfunded.
Despite their norm-breaking approaches to social change, they are highly misunderstood.
For most, how to do this amazing work is a little bit of a mystery.
And we need to change that.
There's an incredible wealth of knowledge and lived experience on how networks can and do change our world.
That's why, across the month of May 2023, we will bring together thousands of network leaders,
funders, conveners, companies, and governments to deepen our understanding of how to drive social change through networks.
To learn together, to share together.
Try out new practices, new ideas.
And we will play.
Some of the most impactful social change happens when people have fun together.
We need to deploy the knowledge and the wisdom, the collaborative power to create magic that will make our world a better place.
We'd love you to join us.
Will you join us?
See you there.
Thanks, Rachel, for kicking us off.
Hello, everyone. Really wonderful to have you here from all your corners of the world.
I told YouTube not to autoplay. That happened this morning, and I was really confused. I thought Beverly was jumping in and interrupting me. So I'll leave you just 10 seconds to share what resonated with you from the video. And so I see Beth already shared on the fun piece. A lot of people are resonating with the fun piece, throwing a better party. Simple but an important idea. I borrowed that from somebody who borrowed it from somebody else. So let's see just a few more comments coming through. Play and fun, cross-pollination. Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Michelle. Resonate with not feeling alone, like an odd duck meeting other odd ducks. Nice, I like that. I think I might copy that quote as well. Building belonging, community, network can and do change the world. Yes, I like that one as well. I am going to, we'll be sharing a bit more about the festival towards the end, sharing some links. And like I said, inviting you to dance a little bit with us throughout. But I'm really excited for this session. There's been a lot of work behind it. This is something that we think is incredibly important. We hear from funders over and over again that this is something that they struggle with. So we're really happy to have you all here. And I'm really grateful to the hosts for putting deep thought into this session. But You want to listen to them and not me, so I'm going to mute, hand it over to Adrian, who will then hand it over to them.
Hi, welcome everybody. Nice that you all made it to our session. I have the honor to just shortly introduce our amazing speakers for today. So we have Jane Weiss-Gillern, who is going to be facilitating the session, a senior fellow at Berkeley Haas School of Business, and like with a deep expertise into non-profit networks, which you can also read about more. We're going to share some of her resources later on. We have Agnes Meneses, the principal of her own consulting firm, bringing over 23 years of experience with philanthropy and really centering equity and belonging to foster systemic change. We have Claire Wathen, the Director of Networks and Partnerships at Skoll Foundation. And lastly, we have Marty Koistra, network weaver at Civic Commons, and also really dedicated to equity, affordable housing, and coalition-based work. And I will just hand it over right away to you. Enjoy your session.
Thank you, Adrian and Brendan, for setting us up. It's wonderful to be here with you all, and delighted that you're all here joining us. I wanted to just share some perspective, and each of us will do that in turn so you get a better sense of where we're coming from. I'm an academic. Sometimes I tell people I'm a recovering academic who has been studying leading edge networks for a very long time. My interest has always been in the field of practice and how to engage leaders at all levels on how to work in this way. And I don't pretend to have invented network leadership. I just happen to have had the privilege to study people who have done this work well, and spent my career making the case for why to funders and board members and staff and teams within nonprofit organizations. And the reason why is because I have not seen anything that comes close to the ability for networks to achieve transformational change in a sustainable, high leverage, high impact, efficient, effective way. And that's why I've spent my last 20 plus years of my career just trying to make the case. And what seems apparent, so apparent, is that it's quite simple. It's really not a complex thing you need long-term consulting engagements, a lot of analysis on. It really is, what it boils down to is trust and relationships. And that relational foundation upon which you build collaborative work is how you get these beautiful partnerships. And one of the things that I've seen in many cases is that organizations that might seem to bring the most resources or have the upper hand in a collaborative, the way they make their network succeed is not exercising that power or that status. That in fact, they work in a very humble way that engages others and brings others in, because every resource is valuable, whether it's financial or social capital or relational. All of those things matter tremendously. And that big picture view of we are one among many is what drives this. And again, I always like to keep things simple. So I've written extensively about some 4 simple principles around what makes networks work. And it's humility, a focus on trust, peer relationships, and a focus on building constellations, not stars, not being the brightest star, but building that constellation and shining together. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues and look forward to having the chance to engage with you all.
Thank you, Jane. I'm really so happy to be here. My name is Agnes Meneses. She, her, hers are my pronouns. Part of my background is I've worked in philanthropy, primarily in Chicago, for more than 20 years. And by virtue of that, have met a ton, many nonprofits along the way. And many of them work in the forms of networks. Some of them are formal and informal. Some are collaborative, some are coalitions. And in my role as being on staff at Foundation, I have supported many of these collaborations and networks as well. I've also worked, part of my background is I worked in a women's foundation and got really heavily involved in working in equity and inclusion and belonging working with people in social justice movement builders, trying to advance and advocate for equitable systems and systemic change. Since then, I had started my own consulting practice, and really the focus of my work now is how to work and continue to support foundations and nonprofits, navigate what it means when we say we're committing to equity, diversity, and inclusion while tending to systems change. As Jane mentioned, throughout my time working in philanthropy and also working with a lot of nonprofits that have worked in networks, it's really becoming clearer and clearer the critical importance of tending to relationships. The social fabric really matters. And that is also an essential and critical piece when we say, how do we practice equity? When we are embodying commitment to equity, there are some shared principles, if you will, when we talk about DEI and networks. And in this time of many foundations also committing to work for equity and inclusion, working through the approach of networks is a way to actually continue that embodiment of DEI work. I also want to share a few of those principles that I mentioned of what a healthy network and shared principles with systems change could look like. It is by virtue of working in a network, there is an attention and intention to paying attention to diversity of voices. That just becomes so profoundly natural when you work in a network setting. You're also working towards the health of the whole versus individual parts. And there's this stance that you also take of really opening up the aperture to look externally for the health of the other parts of the network versus focusing more on your internal needs. Yes, that is important, but it's also important to look externally and see how you are really interdependent with others in that system. It's really focusing on the shared humanity. Relational and social fabric is also, again, very key. The other thing that I also wanted to offer is the word Ubuntu comes to mind. I am because we are, my existence is connected to yours. And it's a quote that I hold dear when thinking about how to really work in community and networks amongst other people. And the last quote that I will also offer, it's by an Aboriginal activist, Lila Watson. And it goes like this: if you have come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Marty or Claire.
I'm happy to jump in. It was beautifully shared, Agnes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to join you. My name's Claire. I'm with the Skoll Foundation and wear a couple other hats in the spaces of networks and collective leadership. Really thrilled to be here and have this conversation. It's something that I think about a lot with my team and have a lot of conversations with others in philanthropy as this area of work is coming more into focus. Many know the Skoll Foundation for our work in social entrepreneurship and thinking about the role of financial capital, as well as our role in philanthropy as opening access, supporting visibility, creating more connectivity between doers and funders. We are increasingly focused on a couple different areas of networks. My own journey with the foundation over about 7 years was on several other teams, and then this area of networks of working more collaboratively emerged, and we 2 years ago set up a team to really focus on this functional area, both to work across the foundation as well as externally. And there's a couple different altitudes that we have found to be helpful to focus in on, especially as we're bringing this into new audiences and thinking about how to engage both internally as well as other foundations, executives, boards, et cetera. And a lot of that work is based on the research that Jane and her collaborators have developed over the years with how do we lead in this way? How do we center the system that we're trying to support shifts in a more just and equitable future for whatever that system might be. We also think about beyond how we can lead in this way ourselves, how organizations are using networks and networked approaches to solve or address different issues. And so there's a set of strategies and approaches that we look at. Foundationally, we think about it as an asset that we have that we can continue to build, cultivate, expand in order to achieve our mission. And so that's been a lot of the anchoring as we think about presenting this in different ways, investing in this in different ways, and funding specific models that are less traditional, less linear. I think that's a bigger area that we still, I know there's many different organizations thinking about how do we measure this? What can we track? What do we want to be able to watch from a trajectory standpoint, and name those areas in order to help build more understanding of how networked approaches, more collective styles of leadership can be really effective, and how we can ultimately be both relevant and ultimately contributing in an equitable way towards what we are existing to do in the world. So really looking forward to unpacking that and seeing also from all of your experiences, different ways that we can talk about this work, make it more simple, make it more invitational to come into and connect with existing strategies and models as we're building more of a collective. So I'll pass it to you, Marty.
Well, thank you, Claire, and greetings, everyone. It's morning here in Seattle. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you today, so I will try to be brief. What brings me to this space? Well, sort of a lifelong history. I started out my career as a construction worker, a builder, and a contractor, but then spent 24 years of my life doing Habitat for Humanity work locally, nationally, and globally, and then spent 8 years leading a 200-member organization association focused on affordable housing. Right now, I'm working on weaving together a network to address the disparities in Black home ownership in the Puget Sound region here. I met Jane in 2004 when I was working on a fellowship at Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government, trying to figure out how to get Habitat for Humanity's affiliates to scale their production. And Jane and I resonated around this notion of growing your organization, growing your impact without necessarily growing your organization. Because we had spent so much time and energy traveling about working on capacity building and leadership development initiatives, and year after year, not seeing a lot of change in performance. And so this notion of really thinking about different ways of having impact has intrigued me for a long time. And Jane and I recently put out a paper that you can find on BoardSource called Reimagining Boards for Impact. And I would offer that to you because a number of the things that came up in the chat when you were starting are addressed in that particular document based on 14 interviews we did with various nonprofits and foundations. One of the things I will say is that what I find and I start to get a little punchy when I get older, so this will come out blunt, but the truth of the matter is that our incentive structures tend to reward people for the gravitational pull away from working in a network way. And so we have to rethink what those incentive structures look like. In my experience of being an ED and a CEO, I find that we generally reward our executives for growing organizations, not necessarily for solving the problem. We make up our boards of directors of nonprofit organizations with donors who are loyal to the brand of that organization, who may not be aware, at no fault of their own, of what the ecosystem is really like. In fact, we create vision statements that we say are aspirational, but yet we do not do anything other than maybe measure organizational performance on an annual basis, but never compare it to the gap between our vision statement and that, nor do we analyze and add up what the ecosystem is delivering against that vision statement. Because we're bound up in this scarcity mindset, and we're bound up in an incentive and reward structure that talks about how well we do things in our organizations. And so we have a lot of work to do to help people understand, what is it going to take to reinvent that incentive structure? How do we move an ecosystem to an ecosystem? How do we get boards to truly understand the magnitude and the dimensions of that ecosystem, leverage self-interest, and stop a scarcity mindset? Those, in my mind, are the things that I am still challenged by every day as I try to do this work. I find that people get excited to get involved, but I also see that a lot of people are surveilling the environment, wondering who's getting an edge, where are the resources going, and all of those pieces. And so we really need to think about, how can we help everybody understand that if you really believe that systems level impact is what we need to address the wicked problems we're facing, then we have to invest at the systems level, not picking homecoming kings and queens and rewarding them, but working at a different way. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. We are for the next part of our session here, we are going to put you in breakout rooms. And it's about 15 minutes in breakout. And we'll, I think Adrienne is going to put the question of the breakout in the chat. So it's also a time to get to know people. It's 3 people in a breakout, approximately. We might be off by 1 or 2. And just share your personal information. Also, this is also a time for play, as Brendan mentioned at the top of our session, that we are also about play. So please share your favorite childhood game and whether or not you continue to do it. And the question is this: we've all had experiences being in collaboration, and many of us are also have worked in networks. And think of the most fulfilling and successful collaborations that you've been a part of, that you have been involved in. What aspects and characteristics contributed to that success? And I think this is also a way to think about not just the deficits of working in network, but really looking at the positive aspects. What and how did it make you feel? What contributed to it? And just really have a conversation with your breakout room partners about what that looks like for you. So does anybody have any clarifying questions before we go into breakout? Are you thinking of your favorite play activity from childhood? I think we're good. All good. So thank you. Adrienne's gonna whisk us away to breakout rooms.
Welcome back.
Should we like tell jokes or something in the spirit of play, as we're I thought about doing like Chat GPT, asking Chat GPT to tell jokes about networks to see what would happen, but I have to, Chat GPT isn't available in Italy anymore, so I'd have to put on a VPN and I didn't get that far. Anybody have it open? Romanus, you or Adrian, could you open it and ask for a joke about
quickly as you might like, but it's a good idea.
See if we can get a few jokes we can share and see which one is best as people are coming back in. Oh, they're all coming back in. Make it. We had a group that left. It seems that they didn't enjoy the conversation as all the rest of you because they came back early. Just kidding. I'm sure you guys really enjoyed your conversation. But we were saying that we in our free time we wanted to see if we could ask ChatGPT for some jokes about networks in the spirit of play and fun. So, but I can't do it because I'm in Italy and it's blocked here. And so if anybody feels like signing into ChatGPT and asking, can you tell us jokes about networks and share them in the chat? I'm really curious to see what it'll come up with, but back to whoever's next.
Thanks, Brendan. I just really wanted to have an open dialogue coming back into plenary about what resonated with you while you were in breakout with your partners in the breakout room. Anything that stuck out to you as far as like common themes that came up? Common experiences of what characteristics contributed to a successful collaboration?
I think the common denominator is an openness of the individuals that are part of it.
We talked about funding, that having stability of funding allows best practices to emerge rather than to be forced into existence, which is a real blessing, and that very often funders want to see findings earlier than is reasonable.
I know in our breakout room, trust came up quite a bit as a common theme, and sometimes trust can also fracture when it's not top of mind or it's not necessarily prioritized. So there's care and caring that goes along with tending to trust in a relationship as well.
I'll jump in from our group and add trust, and I think the investing in the work of building trust and having that be a value and priority of the community.
We talked in our group the power of networks when it comes to difficult situations or very challenging situations, and we had from ISA, this is the International Step-by-Step Association, we have been stepping into helping our partners and others after the war in Ukraine started. And this has been a tremendous experience, actually, not only for our Ukrainian partners, but also for countries around who have received many refugee families, as many of you know. And we were just absolutely thrilled to see, how much our network that is there for like more than 20 years now has been instrumental in bringing really relief and support and encouragement to our Ukrainian partners, but also to the refugee families. So this was a tremendous experience for all of us in the network. And somebody else in my breakground said had some similar experiences when it came to Corona and actually supporting children for whom family, as she put it, is not a safe place to be. And I think these were, really two of the crises I think we all experienced over the last 2 years, 3 years, and we could see how important networks are in these two instances.
Was wondering also, as you were thinking about the characteristics of what made your collaboration a success, like as you think of that, the memory of that, how did it make you feel? What aspects of your own sense of it and you came up for you? because that's also important to pay attention to.
One theme that came up in our group was a shared value of having space to find unexpected outcomes, let things evolve, both individual connections that are unexpected as well as more tangible areas. And with that, the importance of finding some early wins that are mutually beneficial and are something that you can celebrate in both organizations, or if it's broader than a partnership, what's something early that can help people understand beyond the big idea or the big alignment, what's something that is tangible. It also releases pressure on the hosts or the facilitators of the broader initiative, that there is momentum and that people can be part of it as it develops.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Claire's point, and this was raised earlier in the discussion about how funders often want to create new networks and kind of host a party by presumably putting some funding on the table, and then everybody comes in order to possibly get a chance at that funding. And I think a different, more powerful way to build and catalyze networks is to go into communities and find out what's already working, who's already doing great work, building on those existing connections and networks, and then investing in those. So it's kind of a bottoms-up approach to network building rather than the top-down that we often see. But I've certainly seen that to be more powerful, is building on those Indigenous relationships that are already there. And that gets to Claire's point of big wins early on, because you're building on an existing track record of people who are already committed to working in this way and have shown that they can do it and have evidence to show that they can succeed in doing it. And that often then attracts more resources and more partners and starts to snowball on itself. So it's not forcing people who otherwise wouldn't be there if were not for the money, and getting people who already naturally work this way and putting wind in their sails.
So building on what you're saying, Jane, when I started a network, my first network myself, the question that I asked in the community was, who are the people that you trust to serve the needs of the community? And out of that group, about 25 people, then it grew from there, but it created that fertile soil because these were trusted people. And then people thought, well, maybe I should get involved. But these original people also really served as a grounding base to create that central fire and to look, and we then look for things that the community as a whole was interested in having happen. So we ended up creating a new park, but that was based on meetings where we got young people, old people to show up about what they really had energy to do. And there's a native wisdom about go where things are falling together rather than falling apart. And I think we do a lot of chasing the falling apart, which is what a lot of foundations fund, is falling apart. But what we need to do is fund the falling together.
Well said. Thank you so much.
In the for-profit world, we look at the return on investment, et cetera. In nonprofit, we look at return on impact. And I was wondering if we can get some for the investors, for the funders, who look at what's your impact. How I give you money, what's going to happen when I give you that money? How are we defining impact and measuring impact in a network environment?
Michelle, you're raising your hand.
Sure,
Michelle.
thank you. So I actually I started thinking about Scott's comments, and I second that. I'd like to hear more about that. But I guess I was thinking a little bit more about like how little I've seen being written about the relationship between funding and trust and network building. And there, but I observed kind of like two currents of thought. There's this like very purist, this like, a network builder needs to be this pure, great soul that it gives everything, and funding helps, of course, recognize that time, but it's almost like if there's almost too much funding or or if it grows too much, it starts like breaking down the trust barrier, right? Like being able to administer resources that are highly valued in our society, like money, it tends to kind of bring up the types of conversations that are a fantastic litmus test to see how solid that network trust is. But sometimes I do find that even when the network trust is super strong, the conversations fall apart for the lack of language to discuss funding within a network. And I think that that's something that would be super interesting for me, for a lot of friends that do network building, because like we do end up, I don't think falling, but we do end up following initiatives that we would love to do, but that we wouldn't otherwise do if there wasn't at least a little bit of money in there, right? Like, so we can like justify it to our teams, justify it to everyone, you know, if it usually like those extra hours take, you know, maybe like that means that I have to ask my husband to watch the kids a couple of nights a week, but it's, you know, but I'm getting paid, right? So there's this like, there's this role that funding has within networks that does steer the ship a little bit. And I don't think it's inherently bad. It's just something that we need to have a language to talk about it and just give it a role. Because no matter how strategic and focused you are, you will always still give it a little bit more weight if there's funding involved, because that's how, as a society, we speak. If we're consumers, right? Like, if it's worth it, we'll fund it, you know. So anyway, it's these are thoughts that are coming up as we talk about funding and networks.
I see Dan's hand.
We work in a food and wellness innovation network that was originally catalyzed by the Common Approach, which is an effort to standardize impact measurement across a network for multiple organizations, so that the power of defining what to measure is with the organizations who are doing delivery and not with the funders. And so we've taken a couple of dozen organizations through a program of defining what internal strategy looks like and how well you know you're doing as an organization, and then what your program logic model is and how well you know that you're achieving impact. And then we've aggregated those all together to see what we're achieving as a network. And I think the value of the impact definition exercise has been to catalyze the conversations among us to decide what we can achieve collectively versus what we're doing individually, which one of us are the sort of most fertile partners for each other, and what it means to be a network.
Thanks, Dan. David, I see your hand up.
I wanted to respond to something that Scott was saying earlier, though this is I think weaves in with some of the things that Michelle, you were saying about trust. The question of measurement, and I think behind it, the question of accountability. If someone is investing work in building a network, how do they let others know that work is being effective? How do we see where relationships are being built? How do we see where trust is being built, especially if we want it to be built, but we're not in the room to witness it ourselves? I think is a question that I know I've been doing a lot of work around. I've been doing my own exploration around to identify kind of measurement methodologies that are rooted in nonlinear dynamics. But I know, Claire, earlier you mentioned something about there being a range of different efforts to come up with measurement methodologies, and I'm curious for what some of the efforts to measure the impact of network work look like, because it feels like an important missing piece, and I'm curious what the different groups are that are working on it.
Yeah, and happy to take it offline as well. To me, there's different camps, you could say, or groups that are thinking about this. We have a totally different frame for measurement. If it is in our portfolio, we've made a grant to an organization and they are acting as a network or leveraging networks. For example, the Pandemic Action Network, or many organizations that operate in a decentralized way, center community, center trust. And so as we're making the investment, the parameters of understanding the trajectory of that impact is often looking at the system level. There's different things that we're trying to help see if we can shift, whether that be, and that's often defined by that organization, as our funding is primarily core support. In a totally different way, we are looking at, are we being effective in using our connector capacity to build and support and expand networks, join networks. And so for that, we're looking at tracking and measuring things like, is there additional capital flow in the general ecosystem? Are there specific visibility or placement results of our work to connect people, so that if we host a convening or we partner on a convening and we curate people to come together, that sub network of people, are there more placements of those organizations in other portfolios? Can we bring other funders together and move on co-investment? Like, we're trying to essentially spur other activity that's not centered in our organization, but we often put in the seed capital or the seed, space for that to occur. And so there's, 5 to 10 things that we're looking for as indicators that it's worth the investment to partner in this way in order to move more connection, social capital, financial capital, intellectual capital into that area. And there's a number of internal foundation groups that are working on that. There's also a lot of work happening in more academic spaces, and Jane could speak more to that as well. So I think it's also outside of the social impact philanthropy lanes. There's a lot of work happening in other disciplines that are a bit more mainstream, and there's different efforts to try to connect those. So I think ultimately we're trying to get more simple and practical and clear about what it is we're trying to communicate to whom, and what kind of language is used in, say, a practitioner space as opposed to an executive space. I often find myself translating and bridging between those groups, because my board or other executives are going to need language that's much more about return on investment, efficient, effective, strategic models, how by building a network and cultivating connections, we can source new investments. Like, there's a lot of language that is much easier to absorb from different audiences. And so that's also a key role that many people who run and facilitate networks are also holding. That's a whole skill set of bridging, weaving, translating, juggling back and forth the different energy levels, the different understanding levels. And so also would love to see more recognition of that kind of suite of superpowers that many of you have touched on in different ways, that you hold as sort of a, hidden effort that's going on, as well as everything else.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll go on to our next part of the session. Patricia, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to follow up with you, Claire, on this. So I work for Slow Food USA. I'm the development manager, and we have a very vast and diverse network of folks across not only our country, we're an international movement. So you talked about return on investment. You talked about kind of the effectiveness and the efficiency of the work that we're doing. But also, I feel, as in my role, and maybe a lot of us feel the same way, is that, I feel like part of my role is when I go to funders, how do I educate them? I go to all kinds of different funders, big, small businesses, national foundations, federal funders, the whole 9 yards. But is there any sort of, I don't know what the magic bullet is, but I think that if there was something that you could share with us as fundraisers, how we should frame our conversations in a way of educating the funders about the importance of funding networks, if that makes sense.
I'd be happy to.
Please jump in. Yeah.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that. The way I find is most compelling is to share stories of success, to help people understand. So not detailed strategic plans and all the kind of minutia that you can get caught up in, but just share a few kernels of success from a pilot, from a large-scale community project at different levels. And it can just be even a bilateral partnership that has achieved more than you put in many respects, that those stories help people understand why you would do this. And then, I mean, this is really where I've focused on my work, is trying to make the case with case studies of people who've succeeded, and then distilling what are they doing correctly and what are they doing right. And again, not what I say is right, but what seems to be the common pattern across all of them. And it's those 4 principles I shared with you at the outset. It's not really technical rocket science type detail, but really, is there a strong relational foundation? Are organizations working in a culture with a set of norms that differ vastly from how Marty had laid out the challenges at the outset of our conversation, that showing those successes and shining a light on that alternative way of working and how it's working is how we'll convince people. And I guess even on this question of, you know, is there an exit strategy from networks? Because sometimes people feel beholden to them. I always say, if networks feel like they're extra work, then you're doing something wrong. That in fact, they should be energizing, you should be attracting people, they should be growing in their own right, because people get the value out of coming to the network. It's not an obligation. They have to show up at these committee meetings where it's just talking shop and nothing ever happens. It's actually additive, and they're getting connected to resources and opportunities and people that can help them do what they would have already wanted to do. So you're not steering people or trying to corral them into your strategy or a grand strategy that nobody agreed on. It's kind of the lowest common denominator, but rather the network is adding fuel and energy to the things that people are already doing. And that's kind of the rough metric of how I gauge whether a network is succeeding. Is it thriving? Is it growing? Are people energized to come to meetings? And they really don't want to miss the meetings because they get something out of them. And that isn't necessarily a lot of resources involved. It's just building that culture and that community and the relationships that can make things happen. So I think we are about on time on that particular topic, but I wanted to move to our next session, our next focus area, which is then, of course, we know that many of us have experienced successful collaboratives and relationships and networks. And at the same time, we'd like to see more of them, right? Why is it that we aren't able to get large scale collaboratives, or at least more than what we currently see? Because I'd like to see someday where this way of working is the norm, not the exception, and that we didn't feel so lonely working in this way, but rather everybody understood it and it wasn't this uphill battle over and over again. So in the next breakout session, I wanted to ask you all to take a moment to think about what are some potential challenges or tensions that you've faced when you're trying to work in this networked way. And if you would come up with any strategies for overcoming those challenges. So we're going to move again into breakout groups with a new group of people and think about what some of those common tensions and challenges are. And then we'll come back into large group and see if we can share some of the wisdom in our current community of how you've overcome them. So we'll see you in a few. Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope it wasn't too challenging to talk about these things, and if so, you found some good approaches to overcome the challenges.
Adrienne, I was curious if there's like a shared, I've just been taking some general notes in the breakouts. Have you done shared documents in other sessions? Is that helpful? It doesn't need to be if that's too much, but just curious. Oh, okay.
I was trying to send it to you before, but then you went into a breakout, so I couldn't send it.
Back, everybody. Thank you for your participation, engagement. I know we are always short on time in these conversations, so I really encourage you to follow up and reach out to your colleagues on LinkedIn, via email, set up another offline conversation, because I know certainly in every breakout group I've been in thus far, we don't have enough time, and I'd love to continue the conversation offline. So encourage you to reach out to us, your presenters, and also to each other. So I'd love to hear from all of you what resonated with you, what stood out, and are there things that we as a group might be able to be helpful on? And feel free to either put your comment in chat or raise your hand or just speak out. We'd love to hear your thoughts and see how we could be helpful.
I think just recognizing that you're not alone. Sometimes this work can be a little lonely when you're talking to folks that are not in the network space. So the fact that we can actually recognize that others are toiling in a similar direction and we're not alone is a big help.
Yes, indeed. That has certainly been the case for me as well. To see all of you here is really thrilling, because I can tell you as an academic doing this work, it was very lonely at times. And to know there's all these other wonderful amazing leaders who are already doing this great work. It's really great to be part of the community. I have to say that I'm heartened by that as well. Thank you for sharing, Romanis. Yeah, Michelle, please.
I guess like beyond the specific stories, I noticed that just like there's just a sudden like change in your voice when you talk about tensions and and progress being limited, like just how much of ourselves we put into this. Like it's not like, we're cooks saying, that onion was so hard to cut. This is we really put our full selves into this, and it's lovely to see people that are so passionate about what they do.
Any other themes that came out of your group discussions, or tensions that somebody has overcome that you can share an approach that you used that was effective?
Yeah. I also see. Sorry. I also see Faith and then Michelle. Their hands are up.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah. In our group, we were looking at you have people coming to the networks at times with very unrealistic expectations, and it's always or often it's individual interests and people thinking, what am I getting out of it? But we were asking ourselves, what if they ask, what is it that I have that I can be able to give and contribute into the network? I think flipping that coin would be helpful, but also showcasing what is possible, because there's so many good stories out there in terms of what has worked and how it has worked. Being able to share that more often will always create and allow people to be able to see the value and the possibilities that are out there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Michelle, go ahead.
I think Faith just identified a great project to be funded. Sharing those stories. So one of the themes that arose that we heard was, again, just understanding, having decision makers who are funders understand what the value is that they're actually funding and how to measure, and that those measures of like what the relationships, right? It's the relationships that make productivity. It's the relationships that builds trust. It's the relationships that move the thing forward. So what, and then, asking the people in the network, what does it look like, helping them participate in creating that evaluation of what does it look like, what's happening when your relationships are strong. And also from that, my firm, Circle Forward, we're creating a little video right now that compares the network to the mycelium of a healthy ecosystem. It's aimed at funders, sort of telling that story of what you're funding and why that's valuable. So what I'm hoping is that folks in this network will share it once it's done. And I would love to have a couple of folks who would be willing to look at the storyboard and say, does this answer the question that these funders and these boards are asking? And if not, I'd like to know that before I go further. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think we have time for one more. Rosanna, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to share short. I think it was Jill that talked about this in our last meeting, now the breakout room, that one benefit with this this networking in philanthropy is like it's easy to hook people in because people are there for value-based rather than trying to connect in corporates. I think that was a really nice way of seeing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Rosanna. Wow, the time just went by really, really fast. As Jane mentioned, we're always short on time, but we really, truly appreciate your presence here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan or Adrian for our closing.
I think Adrian can do it. Go ahead, Adrian.
Okay.
I'll post stuff in chat and Adrian can talk. Go for it.
Sure. Thanks for the lovely session and the facilitation, all your contributions. It's been lovely, rich, and insightful. I just want to shortly share there's a way to get in touch with the speakers, and Brendan will put those into the chat, the emails, if you want to follow up with somebody specifically. Also, we have amazing resources based on Jane's research at newnetworkleader.org. So if you want to dive into any of these topics, make sure to check that out. The link is also going to be in the chat. And lastly, of course, we have many more amazing events coming up at the festival. The ones specifically about funding are soon about philanthropic evaluation, collaborative learning for transformation. So that's on June 2nd. And then the donor as a facilitator, convener, and thought partner. So thinking beyond just giving money, how can we collaborate with different roles? So those are the more funding oriented events that are coming up, but there's many more things to explore, and I hope we can continue to play together at the Networks Festival. Thank you, everyone.